Welcome to Pushing Forward with Alycia, a podcast that gives disability a voice. Each week, we will explore topics like confidence, ambition, resilience, and finding success against all odds. We are creating a collective community that believes that all things are possible for all people. Open hearts, clear paths, let's go. Welcome back to Pushing Forward with Alycia. I'm Alycia Anderson. We are joined today by Julie Sowash. She is a passionate disability advocate, award-winning business leader, speaker, podcast host of Changing Minds and Changing Lives. I love it. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here.
You are rooted in disability inclusion and a matchmaking for employers and job seekers, trying to bridge that gap for inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce, which I love and is such needed and important work.
Yeah, we really just try to meet employers where they are and in the systems that they use. And then we use those systems to the advantage of talent with disabilities and advertising, branding, all that kind of get the messaging right, get the process right, get the culture right, so that we can help companies build at scale hiring programs that are actually going to result in people getting hired.
I believe that you identify with disability in some way. Can you kind of share with our listeners how this all began, what inspired you to go down this road? Can you share a little bit about you?
So really my background is in federal contractor compliance, which is the complicated way to say affirmative action. And I managed a federal grant for the state of Indiana on overcoming barriers to employment for people with disabilities. And it was really during the time when I was managing that grant that I got appropriately diagnosed. I live with both mental illness and neurodiversity. And I didn't get the neurodiverse diagnosis until I was about 30. And then got to this place of actual stability. And for the most part, you would never know. I was a person that was spiraling 99% of the time because I couldn't manage, because I wore that outward face that, for the most part, kept things together. But I happened to work with some disability experts at the state who were not just my leaders, but were my friends enough to say, we can see what's happening and this is not what stable looks like. Let's talk about what stable looks like. And so for me, as a young single parent, as an adult who grew up where we didn't talk about mental illness, we didn't talk about problems, we just asked Jesus for more help, I had never had a space where I could say, this is not good and my mind's not functioning in the way that I need it to. And so that was kind of my first experience with understanding what normal for me looked like, what stable looked like is the better word. It was my first experience of having a leader that understood what my needs were without necessarily me even telling them. And then we kind of tie in the other piece, right? So if we go back to the actual work stuff and away from the personal, is I realized that government is not going to change the world. Charities are not going to change the world. Businesses change the world. And if we can convince business leaders through both carrots and sticks that hiring in our community is a good thing to do, then we can change the lives of a multitude of people with disabilities, 99% of which we'll never meet in our lives, because we can build programs that ripple off of each other. And we have corporate leaders who can speak to one another about the value. And so that's sort of how I got to this place of what the need was. Then I just happened to be very lucky. Our parent company, so Disability Solutions, parent company Ability Beyond, has had PepsiCo on the board of directors for, I want to say 40 years, at least 20 years. And our board member at the time said, hey, you know, we're figuring out how to hire veterans. We're figuring out how to hire people of color. We're figuring out how to hire women. We cannot figure out how to hire people with disabilities if we pay when you come build it. And I don't say no to an opportunity like that. So fast forward now 13 years later, and I'm lucky enough to lead the organization and to have an amazing team that helps us accomplish our mission every day.
I love the fact that your non-apparent disability is related to neurodiversity and mental health. The second of that, the latter, the mental health piece, is often one of the last ones to really like have its own light shined on it. I know for me as a young disabled woman in the workforce for 20 years before I started my business, I always wanted to mask it. I hid it as long as I could. I wished it away in job interviews. I would overcompensate for it because I felt like I had to be accepted to even get like one wheel in the door to even have a conversation. I want to start with the employee. How do we support and empower them and put them in a space of, this is who I am. I'm not hiding it. I'm going to leverage it as an asset. Let's go.
So I think for me, one sort of eye-opening moment that I've had over the past, I'm going to say 7 years, is I always felt like employee resource groups were a profound waste of time until I started seeing them done well and understanding how magical and impactful those environments can be in creating solidarity for an employee community, as well as creating a safe space in which to do that. And so if I'm talking to an employer, that's one of the first things that we're going to talk through is, what are you doing once a person is in the door? And the likelihood is once they're in the door, you have a great chance of keeping them because they want to be there. What can you do to create the most inclusive environment possible? And so I've kind of, I think, turned the question back a little bit to say that young women and young people with disabilities, should expect more from their employer than what we have expected in the past. And these are some things that you should be looking for in finding a place where you feel is safe and is home. I think the other thing is that we can afford to give each other a lot more grace than we do right now. And so a lot of what stops employers and people who really, really want to be involved in this work and who already have the commitment to the community, oftentimes they get into analysis paralysis because they don't know where to start, but they also are terrified of mucking it up. And if you're terrified of mucking it up, you're coming from a place of genuine care. And so we as employees and we as employers should not expect perfection from each other. And we should give each other grace when there's errors. And so when we're creating an employee environment, I have people on my team who have mental illness. I have people who are on my team who have learning disabilities, who have physical disabilities. I'm not a perfect leader. And sometimes I don't do it right. And I have to say, hey, mucked it up. I'm sorry. And I also have had people who work for me say, hey, this is what I need, and are just being transparent and not trying to think that I should be able to read their mind. Because I think the saying is as old as time. If you've met a person with a disability, you've met a person with a disability. You know, I'm a mom of a young 20-something woman and a even younger than that 20-something woman. And what I found is that their expectations are much different and they're harder on themselves, I think, than even me as a generation earlier. But they're more robust and more outspoken about who they are. And I think as someone who remembers being a 20-something woman who was super driven, is that I also thought that every time I failed, it was catastrophic. And a lot of that was related to the instability that I was experiencing with my disability. And I have talked to parents and young college students and young 20-somethings at the beginning of their career who just have to give themselves more grace, who have to understand that if you have an anxiety attack at work, that happens. You still got to get up and go to work. We still have to do those things, but we have to figure out a way to do them in which you can also be healthy and stable, instead of feeling like, oh my God, I just have to quit. I just have to pull back. And that's really what I want to encourage everyone is just employers want to do it a lot of times, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And people want to go to work and they want to be successful. It's about working together to do that.
Grace is one of my favorite words. So I think that's really beautiful. You talked about companies wanting to do the right thing. There's a lot of fear and anxiety that goes into
this conversation in the workplace. I know you've worked with PepsiCo on this. You've worked with Bristol, like big companies. What are some of the key components of your program, your mission that are really supporting these organizations in this like brand new path of exploration out of just compliance to like the broader human experience?
Let's actually do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Where we started was a lot of like, hey, this has got to be an in-depth consulting. We're going to kind of like McKinsey and EY our way in and do all of this end-to-end stuff. And it was very high maintenance and very labor intensive. And one thing that we learned is that we had to have a product and a solution set to meet companies where they are. And so we know you've got your big dogs like a Pepsi or Frito-Lay or a Synchrony Financial who are 100% in. They've got money to spend and they want sort of that intensive piece of it. And then you have other companies who are dipping their toe in. We're a part of the strategy. Or quite frankly, they're like, hey, we need to advertise. So can we come here and do that with you? And that's really where we sort of do the majority of our work is, hey, let us give you some plug and play solutions that help drive applicants in, that start to help drive self-ID up, and help to train your staff to be more inclusive, or even like accessibility of your apply process, those kind of things. And they can kind of mix and match what they need. Now, the other parts, the really sexy, fun parts are like what we do with a Pepsi or a Frito, where we get into the weeds and say, you have in your candidate database right now 100,000 people. Let's look at how people are moving through that system and create an equitable funnel that allows people with disabilities to move through that system and get to a place where they're going to get to an interview. And then let's take that and continuously measure and do improvements. And so that's the first is, how do we advertise to people with disabilities these open roles from a place that they trust? How do we make sure community-based organizations know about roles when they're opening, especially if you work for a big company and they're just closing like that? And that's really where we're trying to get people to be more thoughtful, is most often the accommodation, and I'm using air quotes around accommodation, that's needed is just getting someone through the apply process. Because if you've applied for a job lately, you may interact with 5 to 10 different vendors that you think are the company, because they're dressed as the company, that are designed to get the most qualified candidate the fastest. That data and those data management techniques are built on data that is flawed. And then you do the human work on the other side, right? Is getting hiring managers comfortable, teaching them about managing talent with disabilities, understanding that just because maybe one person you hired with a disability didn't work out doesn't mean I'm not going to hire people with disabilities anymore. That's something that has always sort of blown me away. And employers feel very comfortable saying, yeah, we don't hire those people. Still, to this day, very comfortable. Or, you know what, we hired that one guy in a wheelchair one time, he didn't work out, so we're good.
Yeah.
You would never hear an employer say that about any other underrepresented community. They would never say that about African Americans, about Brown Americans, about women. And so there's still a lot of bias that we have to overcome. And the best way to do that is to build within systems and to build in ways that exist within their existing systems or existing processes,
And educate on this bias. People don't even realize they're doing it. It's so extreme. It is so extreme sometimes that you actually can't believe it's happening. Can you share like a quick, your favorite success story? And this might be putting you on the spot. Okay, good.
No,
because
I do. So we were working with a call center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And there was a young man that came through a community-based organization. I believe he was like 19 at the time. And he had been working at a retail shop doing janitorial services, which we know is where people with disabilities, social learning disabilities, get shoved and forgotten about a lot of the time. And he had a couple of really big missions in his life. He wanted to buy a car and he wanted to move out of his parents' house. And so where he was having problems securing a job, it was in the interview. He is autistic. He had a very, very literal conversation style. And that was creating the wrong persona for hiring managers. So what we did was we actually built personas based around these types of individuals to help hiring managers understand, hey, you know what? A person who has autism may not interview well. This is going to be one of their challenge areas. Here's some of their strength areas. And he got a job in customer service and he moved out. He bought a car because of the blunt nature of the way that he spoke. It actually made it easier for people to understand because there was not a lot of filler and fluffy words. And that was actually an asset because you're like, people go, oh, people with autism, they can't work in customer service because, you know, they're not personable. They're not sociable. Those are stereotypes. And so getting this kid to work and being able to watch him flourish where he had been told, you know what, your future is sweeping the floor. And that's bull. His future was not sweeping the floor. His future was making enough money to live on his own, to be an adult, to be successful. And all we did for this kid's life before he got to this job was set low expectations. And he is capable of more. People just told him no all the time. And like, it still gives me chills even thinking about it because it was I don't always get to see the impact, but like when I get to see the impact, it changes you and it changes your commitment to the work.
So I got chills too. And I love story because one of my notes right here in front of me is like, how do we shift this paradigm of siloing certain disabilities into certain type of jobs that won't ever move forward and you can't grow your career and all these things. And that was a perfect story to emulate the problem and that there is a solution and there's so much more value behind what we place on disabled people. Okay, so I have a question and it's going to shift a tiny little bit, but I know you've got a podcast too, and it's titled Changing Minds and Changing Lives, and you're exploring topics around DEI and workplace.
Yeah, it's an interview based, very similar to yours. Is, you know, we sit down with experts in the field or just people whose everyday lives are making impact or they have a great story to tell and just sharing those stories so that employers can get comfortable. They can see what's possible, I think is important, but always focusing that back to how do we change your mind to get as many people to work as possible, because that is a life-changing activity for us as human beings.
I love that. And from a DEI perspective, like we're having a lot of conversations about that right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a source of consternation, I guess I would say, because, you know, we did. There was the first 6-7 years of doing this work where people hung up the phone when I called and it was hard. And then, you know, you start to see this shift around a conversation in 2016. I feel like when we were represented on a stage at a party's national convention, when we start to see like on social media, really open conversations that were life-changing conversations as communities gotten built for people who maybe were more isolated. And then you fast forward to 2020 and the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic. And then you have sort of this awakening all of a sudden that we've been lied to. We've been told that we have to fight each other for the same piece of pie. And all that means is that you won't share some of your pie. And you've kept us fighting over this little sliver that you allow us to have as diverse or underrepresented communities. And all of a sudden, the entire world knew what it was like to live as a person who couldn't interact with the world in the same ways that they were comfortable with and used to. And then I think as Americans, we go from one extreme to kind of another extreme. Yeah. The pendulum for our arc of justice is really rotating. And I think that what we're seeing right now is part of that hard swing back. And so you're starting to see some of I call them the corporate shills, pull back. Their commitment was never real.
I love that. Okay, so let's look ahead for a minute. What does the future look like for you and your world?
What we're working on right now is how do we create more system so that we can get better at knowing who we get hired. Wouldn't it be great if we knew for 80 companies how many people that have actually been hired? And so right now we're really figuring out, how do we become the gold standard for data and for outcomes?
I love it. We're going to leave all your information, everything to find you, how to work with your organization in the show notes. So we end the show with a pushing forward moment, like a mantra, something to motivate our community.
Yeah. Just get after it. Yeah, get after it. The work's not going to do itself.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing work. Thank you for going to bat for us in the workplace. It's awesome.
Thanks.
I'm going to sign off. Thank you to our community for showing up every single week. We are growing like crazy, and I appreciate every one of you. This has been Pushing Forward with Alycia, and that is literally how we roll on this podcast. We'll see you next time.